Hey, I'm Jack, and I want to welcome everybody to my shop, and come on in. Shop is quite small. It's 20 by 17, and I have an awful lot of Delta tools, mainly because we were shopping in Hanover, Pennsylvania, which was very close to Frederick, Maryland, a place where I used to live. And as my wife would go shopping, I'd go to this hardware store, which was a treasure chest of Delta equipment. It was a Delta dealer. So essentially, I bought all of my Delta equipment in Pennsylvania well before I moved over here. First thing I want to notice is the contractor saw. It's a standard American-made Delta contractor saw. I had a lot of thought about, do I want a cabinet saw? And my biggest problem was I never really had a place with 220. Where I used to be, you could add 220, but they were paying for the electricity. If I had to go 220, I would have had to go a commercial system and cost me a lot of money. So I decided I'll stick with the contractor saw. And the contractor saw, according to Delta, will do anything the cabinet saw. You just have to do it slower. Now, a couple of equipment I have on here is a grip tight to hold the wood against the fence, and a gripper system as a pusher. And it gives a lot of stability, and you just push it across the blade. A second thing I want to show you about the saw is the outfeed table. Usually people make them and you've got to worry about slots and everything. And I really don't have room for a table that's a formal table. So what I came up with is this magnetic thing. So if you need to do a slot, you can just move it over a little bit and you got your slot. Or if you need to clean the inside of the table because it's all open under there, you can move this out of the way and use your vacuum system to clean the sawdust. And it does build up a lot of sawdust. The next thing I'd like to show is the sliding miter saw. I'm really using it not as a construction tool, but as a cabinet making tool. I recently put the shield around it because everything I was cutting before was hitting the garage door and sitting in those little grooves, and it was unbearable. And everything and all the wood behind it that I got stored. So I put it, and I added a top to it. Carol Miller and I were discussing whether or not we get a lot of this dust coming up in the air. So I figured that just putting a little piece of wood on the top would stop most of the stuff coming. Now, the thing about this thing is it's got a Craig measuring system on it. And what I call the Craig production stop. And basically what you do is you select your distance, lock it into position and cut. But, you know, we cut a lot of 3-inch pieces and 2-inch pieces for the boat shop. So what do you do when you have a 2-inch piece? Well, first of all, I added a backstop. So when you cut, you got something backing up the wood and it doesn't go flying behind it. I also added, I don't know if you can see this, Tom, but tape. And with the tape, you can actually see, if you want to cut a line, you can see exactly where the saw is going to cut. I got a laser, but I think the tape is better. And so when you want to cut, say, a 3-inch piece, what you simply do, I have a 12-inch piece. You set this at 15 inches. Put this here. Now I got a 3-inch piece. So it's quite nice. And again, when you're cutting 2-inch pieces and 1-inch pieces, don't go flying behind you and against the wall and all kind of different places. Okay, next thing is a set of sanders, and this is a oscillating sander, mostly for doing curves. A Delta machine. This is a Delta mortising machine, which I use a little bit. And this is an Excalibur scroll saw. Again, with the bandsaw, there's not much need for a scroll saw. There's also a compressor underneath and some more clamps. Above it is my clamp wall. And I think there's an axiom in woodworking that you can never have too many clamps. But I think I do. I think male has more than I do. But I have a lot of small ones on the side too, and a lot of ones down here. I have the Bessie parallel clamps, which are quite good. And then I have a lot of these relatively inexpensive clamps, but they really work good when you're trying to get 3 or 4 foot span and you're trying to hold a piece of wood against it and then get another piece of wood. It's much easier to close than trying one of these parallel clamps. And you close that first, then you get your parallel clamp, then clamp it. Again, a Tom fan. It's hanging basically on a curtain rod, and I don't know if you can see the washers, but I have big washers up there, and I got S-hooks, and it sort of worked real good to hold it. You can move it if you want, and you can take it down. And next thing is the large sander. Delta, 18 inches or 36 inches total. I used it a lot for making tabletops and all. It has a lot of advantages over a planer. You can do real thin wood. Also, you don't have any Skype with this thing. So if you have an uneven piece of wood, you can run it through and it'll just take it right off the top of the surface and make the two surfaces parallel. So I've used it a lot, but I use it a lot with 60 grit paper, sort of like an alternate planer. This is my Powermatic bandsaw. It's a standard 14-inch bandsaw with the height adjustment in it. My wife said I should change my collection box, but that really works good. I cut a lot of angle pieces off and pieces off, and when you have the thing tilted, they just fall right into the box, and they're not all over the floor. This is the Delta drill press, and again, I just added what I call Tom's vacuum system to it that I purchased. Only thing I don't like sometimes when you turn it on, it has a tendency to pull down away, so I might have to put something on the back of it. I haven't used it for drilling anything significant yet. And I hooked that to an old Sears Craftsman vacuum so I don't have to drag vacuum lines. Here's my sanding table, a 4x36 and a 12-inch, and each of them have its own vacuum line. And I talked to PMC and brought some things with them, and we spent about a half hour finding some parts, but I was able to cut the line in half instead of being 10 foot all over the floor to 5 feet, and then actually be able to put an adapter to get into my 4-inch. So I have lines everywhere now. Instead of having 10-foot cables everywhere, I've got 5 foots. So that worked real good. Basically, these two things are for doing boat show stuff. This one, Henry has this unique design of a 3-gun turret. that is angled. And I've tried it on the saw. It's too dangerous to do, and it's much easier to do by tilting the table and a cross feed and just sanding it down with 60 paper. It works great. The next thing I want to talk about is a router table. It's a CMT router table and a Hitachi H12 router underneath. And I do use it a lot. It's one of my favorite tools. And I have a lot of router bits. And I like to make my own crown molding type, solid crown molding out of a 2x4. And so I could use it. Now, there's some features about this I want to just mention. There are a lot of router tables. I'm using the clamp to hold it. There's their own system, but this is quicker. Basically, it's a pivot point. It's not like a lot of them where there are 2 points that you got to adjust. 1 point. You take out the center. Now, the beauty of the Hitachi, you put the router bit in, you can lock it, then take what I call the bent wrench and lock it all from the top without having to go underneath it and fight. Put your things on. Line up the roller. Tighten it. And remember, 2 points develop a straight line, so you're going to have a straight line. So I use this a lot for a lot of different things. Okay, next thing I want to show is again the DeWalt thickness planer. I know I have that big vacuum system, but it's just a 4-inch, 1 horsepower. And I got this right angle valve. I found when you're planing 10-inch, 9-inch pieces of wood, even if you're taking a little bit off, you know, this stuff that looks like straw for an Easter basket, it clogs real easily into the vacuum line. And after a while, it stops. So I found it much easier to put the right angle valve on it and put a bucket underneath it and just catch it directly into a bucket. So that worked good. Up here, is the Lee D4 jig for doing dovetails. And just drills, sanders, fine sanders, DeWalt sanders, and tools. And I'll talk here about this box. Before I started cleaning, everything was an open shelf system, open box. And I realized everything was getting just covered with dust and dirt. So what I simply did was put a frame around the inside of this, put a piece of plywood and a little frame around the outside, and it basically, inside of a few minutes, made a cupboard out of it. And put a piece of plywood door, hinges, and I got a nice cupboard to store things. And it's pretty well dust free. I guess here we'll talk about the workbench. I think I showed a picture of it once. And basically, it's a sit-down workbench. A lot of work is tedious in sitting down with screwdrivers and things. And especially if you're working on boat parts and guns. I usually make a lot of guns. And I've had this with hundreds and hundreds of guns lined up. And it's easier to sit down and do it. I have a 3-drawer thing, it's like a kitchen drawer with common tools, so I don't have to go over looking into the various tools in the drawers for things you use a lot. So everyday tools is here. There are more clamps on the side, and when I designed this thing, I designed it that you could clamp on all 4 sides. And that's what is it? Zeiss vise, and it opens to about 8 inches, but you can turn it upside down and work it so you can actually clamp a piece to the side, the entire length of the table, or any length. But it's been sitting in a drawer for years, and I decided to put it there because I needed a small vise all the time, and then I got the big one when I need one. Next thing I want to show is just a joiner, a Delta joiner, 6-inch. And again, hook it up to that vacuum system. It's on wheels, it moves. And I use that a fair amount too. And I think the last thing we're going to show today is what I call the Legacy Ornamental Mill. And basically, it's a mill and a fancy lathe. It turns round, square. You can do all kind of work with it. And I thought I'd give you a short demonstration of how it works. Sometimes watching somebody turn something, it's like watching paint dry. But I think if you see how it works and how easy a lot of it works, you'd be impressed with it. Also, instead of 3 feet on most lathes, you can turn up to 6 feet on this one. So, bedposts, people make columns. A lot of these were bought in England. They do barley twist and 3, 4, 5, 6 foot long. And this is typical of a barley twist piece that you can make with the mill. I'm not going to do a barley twist today because it takes a lot of time and a lot of setup to do it. I'm just going to do a simple turning and maybe some. It works different than a lot of lathes. It's got a hub on it that you screw in and a point. You do it exactly like you do a lathe. You found the center. You put the hub at the center. You put it in. And I'm going to lock it in place in a second. I'm just locking this tailstock to the table, and it's locked in place. Now, it turns. But now I remove the clothespin, and to release this pin here that locks the piece into position. What I'm going to do is try to square it off. I'm using some rough wood, and I didn't try to run it through the planer or do anything first. I just put it on the machine. And I'm going to close this door, which is a small storage room, and start. What I'm using is a planer bit And one of the nice things about the Porter Cable router is they have this quick release, and to lock the router bit in, you just do that. You don't have any wrenches, you don't have anything else to worry about. So I'm going to bring lays down to 2 inches and lock it into position. And I'm going to try to do, I'm going to square this. I'm going to bring my down. That's 0 point. And I'm just going to use drill bit, or I could use a feeler gauge. And I think I'll just do like 40 thousandths. So what I'm going to do is make that 40 thousandths, take 40 thousandths off the top. Like that in position. And I'm going to get my glasses. And we'll get it running. And I think I'll just let you see. I'll move it out of the way, and you can see how we planed off 20 thousandths there. Next thing I'm going to do is going to move it 1, 2, 3, 4, 1/4 around. This is 24th tooth hole, so I just moved it 6 holes to get to this point. So I'm going to take this back. I guess I got to say, they do have a digital system that runs by a computer. This is pretty old now, but the newer systems are all computer controlled. Makes it a lot easier than me sitting here manually doing it. hard to do. I got all four squared up, and you can see we've got it all squared. It's all from a point on top to this point. Now I'm just going to turn it around to show you, how that portion of it works. And you notice I took it off. I have no problem taking the piece out of the lathe, putting it back on. In fact, if you had 4 pieces, I would suggest you do all 4 of them at the same time. Do 1, 2, keep everything in order. Instead of trying to remember where you had everything set, you do 4. So the next thing we want to do is make it round. So we're going to go to a point somewhere back here. It doesn't make any difference where. Okay. What we know is we have a point that this is square. Now, whether or not it'll be a complete circle, I don't know. We may have to adjust it. So what I'm going to do is exchange the gear mechanism here. For a device to turn it. And get the lock mechanism out of the way. And as you see, as you turn it, secondly, as you turn this is going to move. So, I want to start here, and above it's going to be the top of my leg, and I'm going to go down I think this is set a couple of inches away from it to 22. Set this stop at 22 inches. So I now have my so what I'm going to do is turn it without moving it to see whether or not we become round, and then make any adjustments in the height to make it round. And you can look and see, feel, we're pretty round at that point. I think time's running out. I think this shows. And then you could use a whole series of bits. Big ones like this one, others. And I have a whole box of these bits from a company called Magnate that you can make designs. And one of the features on this chart here, they gave you this graph paper. And basically what you could do, they have this series of plastic representation of a drill bit, and you could use it to actually draw what your leg's going to look like. And these were just some early designs I was making when I was in Maryland for legs I wanted to make, ideas. I don't know if you can see that. These are barley twist, and that's a double barley twist. And it's one of those ones, if you make a minor mistake, you ruin it. But I think this shows the legacy. There's an awful lot of other things you can do with it. It could act as a mill with a board on it instead of this. I use it a lot too for solid, like multi-sided tapers. You can do a 4-sided taper real easily, which is really hard to do with the table saw. So if you want to make a fine table with a very tapered, 4-sided tapered leg, it's easy to do one here. You just put the wood on and you raise or lower the bed appropriately, and you get a taper. This bed has wheels, and you can just sit, and I'm going to pull it out a little bit. And you can basically adjust the height of the back of the table. Now I have a taper. And I guess I want to thank Tom for videoing. I guess I'll be there Tuesday to answer any questions. Please find questions. And again, welcome to my shop, and I hope maybe some of the ideas I mentioned are useful to somebody, and we can talk about it more on Tuesday. Again, thanks, Tom, for